Welcome to Association Chat, an online discussion for the association community where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with the topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm the host of Association Chat, Kiki L'Italienne, and today we're talking with Brant Menswar. He's named one of the nation's top 10 motivational speakers. He's a critically acclaimed author. He's an award-winning musician, podcast host, and the CEO and founder of Rockstar Impact. He's showing companies how to cultivate values-based leadership. And guess what? He has a new book coming out called Black Sheep. It's coming out in October. And he has a plan to reach out to people in a new way. And we're going to talk about that today. Brant, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks, Kiki. I appreciate you having me.
Okay, so I want to go ahead and just guess that 2020 hasn't started out the way that you thought it would. I mean, I'm thinking that in like January, as one of the top 10 motivational speakers in the world, that you probably didn't guess that this is where we would be right now. So, you know, in our family, we have a discussion every night about what was your high and low. So what's been your high and low from this strange year?
Well, you're right. It's been a little bit, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, as we like to say around here. And, so in March, there was a moment that happened where we watched pretty much every scheduled talk from March to the end of December just vanish. Either canceling or postponing or, trying to figure out how to move to virtual in some way, shape, or form. And so, when you watch that amount of revenue disappear after working so hard to sort of get to the point where you're in demand and people want to hear from you. And it's like, I sort of came out of last year on this high of, I went from speaking to a few hundred people to a few thousand people on a regular basis. And you're like, this is it. This is my breakthrough year. And then it's like, no, that ain't happening. You get the slap on the hand and it's like, So it was hard. It was really hard to sort of watch that happen. But, what it did do is it forced me to innovate. And so, while the downside of it was watching sort of all of the pre-sale book sales go away, all of the revenue from speaking at these conferences, what it did force me to do is sort of look at what else is possible. And so I spent a good month or two just diving into the virtual world of what does it take to produce a virtual keynote that is more than just a talking head or, a deck and a little picture up in the corner. And so, it forced me to invest into sort of a full-blown studio in my office here where I've got multi-cameras. I've got the ability to do a whole bunch of different things that's more like a late night talk show than it is sort of a keynote presentation. And so what that has allowed me to do is say, you know what, when we go back to being able to be in person and do these live events, I will use those to inspire and motivate, right? And get people like they just watched Rocky for the first time walking out of the theater. That's fantastic. But what I have discovered is that the virtual world is so much better at driving behavior change that I'm going to use this to supplement what I do in person. So I'll get people all riled up and excited about something in front of a couple thousand people. But then when it comes to the rubber hitting the road and we're doing the work, we'll use the virtual space to help them on their journey. And so I'm actually thankful in a lot of ways that it sort of forced us into what's next. But now I feel like no matter what we get thrown, we've got something that we can go to that's effective, efficient, and doesn't really lack the quality that I was worried about when all this first happened.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it is helpful for us to take what we have with technology and to take our creativity and to figure out new ways to connect with people. One of the benefits, I guess, the silver linings to all of this has been that, people who didn't have in-person conferences and meetings as accessible to them, and maybe they never could have, attended a particular conference before. They're now able to attend as as conferences, and the meeting planners are having to figure out new ways to reach these audiences.
That's right.
And so what happens between now and then, what happens between now and this time next year will be really interesting to see. But
Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I think for speakers like yourself, I think that it is such a challenge because you're having to adapt even more quickly than usual. But this leads into the second thing that I wanted to ask you, and that has to do with when I looked into a little bit about your background, and I'm hoping to open up to find out a little bit more about you and how you came to be who you are today. I noticed this theme. I noticed that there was some kind of communication, some kind of performance, it seems like for a very long time that you have had this natural inclination or been drawn to connecting with people, either through, your talents as a musician or through speaking to them from a stage or just basically gathering people together and communicating with them. Is that true? And do you have memories of being a kid and like dragging people in to perform for them? Or talk to me a little bit about, have you always been this way?
So no, the answer is no. That
really?
isn't, which is, I know it may be a little bit hard to believe, but I grew up a very serious athlete. And so for me, like I had one plan from the time I was, maybe 6 years old to high school, which was I was going to play professional baseball. And I come from a baseball family. I am born and raised in Manchester, New Hampshire, just outside of Boston. And so I've lost a lot of my wicked smart accent, but that's how we used to talk and go to Patty's and drive the cars. And that's what we do. But the idea for me, my dad is a very well-known pitching coach up in New England. My uncle was an incredible baseball player, went to University of New Haven and played for them as well. And, so it's in my blood. And I got hurt and wasn't able to play any longer. And so that to me led to the discovery of music. And, I pastored a church for 6 years. I did all these other sorts of things. And it was because I was looking for something that gave me the same feeling like I had when I was on the mound. So I was a pitcher. And so I spent so many years trying to replace that feeling of what it was like to sort of be in control, standing on a mound, ready to try to beat the person who is in front of me. And that competitiveness drove me in the music business. It drove me in the business world in general. Before sort of my music career sort of came out of nowhere, I was the vice president of business development for the largest commercial collection agency in the world. And I'd been doing it for 5 years and all of a sudden felt this call to music. And next thing you know, I quit my big paying job and now all of a sudden I'm playing for tips in a coffee shop, which was more difficult to convince the family that I was making a good decision at that time. But I've used that same sort of competitiveness, that drive to push things forward. And so why it's been so successful, I think, and why you've seen me do several things is because impact is one of my core values. And so it took me a minute to figure out what was the best vehicle for the impact that I wanted to have. And it went from leading sales teams to, leading people on the stage, performing for them, to leading a church for a few years, to doing these different types of things where I knew it was the impact that I desired, but I never quite found the right vehicle until now, which has been just as a keynote speaker, really, I feel like this is what I was made for. And it's been an incredible journey the last, 6 or 7 years.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about Black Sheep. Okay,
yes.
Let's talk about it.
Yes.
And I just have to say, gorgeous. I mean, I just think that this is so cool. And for those of you who may not realize it, I mean, talk about taking your brand all the way through. I received an advanced copy of this, and look at this lovely letter with the stamp, and then the cool sticker that is like the Black Sheep. I just have to say, very good on the branding, very good personal touch all the way around for anyone who's paying attention.
I care probably more than I would care to admit to you how much I care about those sorts of things. And so, for me, the branding is just an extension of me. And so if it doesn't honor those things that matter most to me, then it's not real or authentic, and I can't be a part of that. So,
and I see Neen says, to my fave peeps on the one screen.
My favorite Aussie. Yes.
I know.
Love her.
She is absolutely amazing. I've been watching her on video lately too. And then we have Kathy Kelly saying the book and the author are amazing. Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
That
so let's talk about it. So it's Black Sheep, Unleash the Extraordinary, Awe-Inspiring, Undiscovered You.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when you think about black sheep, you don't think of something positive. It's like the black sheep of your family is the person you're not trying to be like. The black sheep is the person who there's something different or negative about them. How did this come to be called Black Sheep? Can you tell me a little bit about the background of that?
Yeah, you bet. So I was 47 years old when I finally was told why farmers don't value black sheep like the rest of the flock. And when I found out the truth, it shocked me in a way that I hope shocks people who pick up this book. And so the truth is that farmers don't value black sheep like they do the rest of the flock because a black sheep's wool cannot be dyed. So every black sheep is in effect 100% authentically original. And when I heard that, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like, we have demonized black sheep for hundreds of years, when in fact, is that not who we should try to aspire to be, like to be that unique original creation that we were made to be? And I'm like, that's my life's goal, is apparently to be a black sheep. And so when I started to do the research for it, what I found that was honestly one of the more interesting sort of takeaways, Kiki, was that I found just as many people who feel like black sheep who are so successful at what they've done that they've separated themselves so far from the pack that that's what's made them a black sheep. It wasn't the outcast. It wasn't the goth kid in high school or the crazy music that you listen to. It was people who just have outpaced everyone else, and they've separated themselves so far that we look at them like a black sheep, right? And so when I saw that, I'm like, gosh, it made me realize that we all possess what I like to call a flock of 5 black sheep values. And these are the values that no matter how much someone wants to try to twist you or change you or turn you into something that you're not, they simply cannot be changed like a black sheep's wool. And so the goal of the book is to try to get people to discover what are their black sheep values.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, I'm going to cut to the chase for everyone and say that I went ahead and I jumped online. I got a little inside knowledge about where I could do a quiz and go through. And I filled it out. I got this really cool printout of all my information at the end. I think I found my 5. I'm at the beginning of this process.
That's right.
I found my 5. But I have to say, this is hard. When people start talking about, leading and living by your values, that sounds really good. Maybe you've read books or listened to podcasts and you're thinking, like, I know a couple of my values. You might be that far along in your path. But this is actually, when you take a look at all of the different possibilities and you really start to drill down, it's not quite as simple as it may seem. And I think the hardest part for me was to really push to try to go with the answers that are the most real and honest, and maybe not the ones that sound the best, like the ones that Gary Vaynerchuk would have or something like that.
That's right. Well, let's talk about it for a second, because I actually have yours. I have pulled up your particular assessment. And so what's interesting to me when I look at this is, so the first thing that the assessment does, right? And so anybody you can go to findyourblacksheep.com, click on Find Your Flock and start this journey, right? And so the very first part of the journey, it presents you with 125 commonly held personal core values. And it simply says, read through these quickly, and any word that resonates with you, just go ahead and check it off, right? So you'll go accountability. Oh yeah, that resonates. Check it off. Oh, let's see. Achievement. Yeah, I like that. Success. Oh, I like that. Empathy. Okay. Hope. Okay. So you sort of go through all these different words. And what we have found over the last 2 years is that the average person selects over 30 words that are very important to them. And when I look at you,
I did.
my dear, you are far and exceeding.
I care about a lot of things.
You do. And so here's the thing. It's not good or bad, right? Yeah. What it does though, and the reason that you found this incredibly difficult is because when you have a lot of things that are really important to you, separating your non-negotiables from the things that are really important is tough work, right? And so the second part takes those words that you have said, these are the things that I really find important, and we sort of group them by likeness, right? So things like empathy and sympathy or achievement and success, those go into their own sort of separate buckets. And so when you're done, you sort of have 5 buckets worth of words, and you pick the one word that you can't live without, right? And so why don't you share what your initial flock of 5 are?
So my initial flock of 5 were pleasure, love, truth, community, and yes. creativity.
Yes.
And, I have to say, it sounds like love sounds admirable, but pleasure sounds gluttonous. Pleasure sounds like, I feel like I should be hard hitting, there should be like concern for the world or something. And it's like, or integrity with it, which matters to me, but pleasure to have that there. But I was trying to be so real, Brant. I was trying to be like, okay, like what really matters and what makes me do or not do something. Part of that weighs into, is there a level of pleasure there? Do I get pleasure from that thing? And I don't know if that's going to be one of the final 5, but for now it made it to this point. And I'm not proud of it. I'm kind of like,
it's okay.
Lie about it,
It's totally okay. And this is totally normal, right? And so you're experiencing, so this is what happens when you get to your initial flock of 5. We know, I know for a fact that 2 or 3 of these are absolute truth, right? You can give me 20 different examples over the course of your life where these things have shown up. They continue to show up. I know that. So I know that 2 or 3 of these are real. But I also know that 2 or 3 of them are what I like to call aspirational sheep, right? These are sheep that live in the future. These are who you want to be, but they're not who you are. And so what happens next? You asked me earlier before we jumped on, you said, I don't know what happens next now that I found my 5. Well, what happens next is you use, there's a free workbook that comes with it, right? And so this workbook has you track these values for 2 weeks. I call it counting sheep, right? A little different than putting yourself to sleep. But at the end of each night, what I want people to do is before you go to bed, the last thing I want you to do before you go to bed is I want you to grab this worksheet, this workbook, and I want you to go ahead and I want you to look at it. And I want you to dig back over the course of the day. And I want you to try to find evidence that these things showed up organically. Right? So you would look and you'd go, have I found pleasure today? Have I found love today? Where did I find it? What was the scenario that it appeared? And who did I find it with? And you begin to track those things. And so what you're going to find after a week is that some of these words show up multiple times every day without you trying, right? Those are the ones that you should feel pretty good about. But there's going to be others that don't appear anywhere near the amount that you think they do. And so this is really where we have this sort of revelation. And this is something that's come out of a lot of these group trainings that I've been able to do recently. And the idea is this: I deal with a lot of people who, for whatever reason, Kiki, they just don't like themselves all that much. Right. And I don't know the reasons why. It's something in their history more than likely, or how they were raised, or decisions that they've made, or whatever that might be. But for whatever particular reason, they don't necessarily like themselves all that much. And what I have to say to them, especially when they get to this and they start the tracking process and they see for a fact that there are certain things that they are claiming to be truth that simply don't exist. There is no proof that these things are real. So my question to them becomes, How do you know that the person you don't like is actually you? And so one of the quotes that you had put out to sort of promote this was that a lot of my work is teaching people that they're already enough.
Yes.
And so this is really what that comes down to, is that if you are searching for things that don't exist, you're never going to feel like you're enough. But when you find the things that are truly your black sheep values, these non-negotiable, deeply held personal core values, when you find them and you find evidence of them, and you know they're real, you can speak with authority. You can make decisions with authority. And all of a sudden, you start to realize that the person that you didn't like wasn't actually you. It was this projection of who you think you should be. Oh. And because there's no evidence, that's where you have this aha moment, right? Yeah. And so the reason that we track is because one of two things happens. When we look and we don't find evidence, we do what we call leveling up in a lot of cases. And so you tell me that community is one of your black sheep values. Yes. Now I'm going to look at that and I'm going to say, okay, I know what you mean by community. And it very well might be one, especially with what you do for a living and everything like that. But as we start to track, what about the days that you don't have anything to do at work? What about the days that you don't have anything on your calendar? You have 0 appointments for the day. How does this sheep get fed? And so what you end up finding is sometimes we have to level up to a larger word that encompasses the word that you selected. So I look at community, and if I leveled up, the actual value is connection. And you're giving me one way in which you experience connection, which is through community. But I could give you 10 different ways that you experience connection. You do it through spirituality. You do it through relationships. You do it through family. You do it through faith. You do it through, there's so many different ways. And so that's what I mean when I say leveling up. We look for the word that is sort of at the top. What you're going to find is that our values live in a matrix sort of organization, right? And so you have to find that one at the top that really helps cover a lot of the ones that are beneath it. So with something like connection, you cover all of the things that we just talked about: community, faith, family, relationships, all of those sorts of things get covered under the larger word. So that's sort of one of the first things that we look at is, can we level up to a word to find more proof? And the second thing would be that there's a very good potential that you're sabotaging yourself from something appearing. And so we have to look at why that is. And I had this discussion the other day with a friend who I've known for a month or two. And in our discussion, I said, we got to his 5 and he's telling me about why he chose his 5. And, I know enough about him now, about his past and sort of where he comes from. He's in his 20s. He's got a successful business. And I'm looking at him like, I don't see the word that I could have, if you would have asked me to put money on it, I would have said that impact would have been one of your black sheep values. But not only is it not one of your 5, it isn't even one of the words that you selected in the things that were important to you. And I said, let me tell you why that doesn't resonate with me, is because I gave him like 6 examples in the last week of all the things that he, in the conversations that we have had together, where impact has been the centerpiece of the conversation. Wow. And he told me, he said, you're absolutely right. And he said, to be honest with you, I have an aversion to that word because he said, I don't like who I used to be. And anybody that knew me 5 or 6 years ago, I was not the person that I am today. And if they saw me claim something like impact, I think that they would call BS and say that there's no way that I could care about that and treat you that way. And so I was like, okay.
Wow.
Right. So here's the deal. What you are going to discover is what I've discovered over the last couple of years, which is 99% of us are winging it. Mm-hmm. If I asked you to tell me what are your 5 non-negotiable values, you wouldn't really be able to do it for the most part. I have people that will tell me the things that they know are important, just like you did, but you gave me 60 plus things that were important to you, right? And so I have to look at that and go, okay, all right, so I get that. But what about your purpose? Everybody, there was Simon Sinek came out with a fantastic book called Start With Why.
Yes.
But it's been a little bit confusing, and people have not experienced the transformation that I have found, and that maybe they were thinking when they first got that book. And that's because you can't actually start with why.
I mean, I just want to stop there because, I have to say that that's become a mantra for folks. I know people who've built their entire businesses around just that concept, right?
Yeah.
And when I heard you mention this before, I thought, oh, that's controversial. But you have such a good argument for it. And I realized I had never really questioned, is that true? Is it true? Is it true all the time? And I love your argument for that. It's not necessarily the start with why, it's the
start with what.
Yeah.
See, so I break things down into 3 separate areas, right? So we've got the what, the why, and the how. The what are our black sheep values, the why is our purpose, and the how is our mission, right? And so whether you're an individual or an organization, it doesn't really matter. It all works the same way, right? And so the idea here is this. I get that you want to lead with your why, which I agree with 100%. You should be leading with that purpose. But how do you know your purpose is correct? Right. And that is where people struggle, right? It's because if you start with why without defining the things that matter most to you, then there is a misalignment between your core values and your purpose. And so the fact is, purpose is not something we find. So stop treating it like some Indiana Jones temple of whatever crusade, right? It doesn't work that way. Purpose is something we choose, and we choose it by activating our black sheep values. So for me, right, my black sheep values: creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, and authenticity. I have 6. I'm a rock star. We do everything to excess, right? I do 6. I needed an extra. So those are my 6 values that define everything that's most important to me. Now, my purpose is to creatively impact others by authentically providing hope. And so if it sounds familiar, it's because it is the activation of those black sheep values that make up my purpose. So that's why you can't start with why. You have to start with what, because it's out of the what that your why is chosen. And when those 2 things are in alignment, then the how, man, you become so adaptable. You become so resilient in fulfilling whatever that purpose is, because those 2 things are what keep you committed to the goals at hand. So if you are out of alignment with those, it's why the goals never actually come to fruition, is because your what and your why are off from each other. But when they're together, when they're born of the same thing, then that how, that mission, and I think a lot of times we take the word mission and we distort it, right? A mission is nothing more than a self-imposed task. You do not need to be in some third world country with no running water and no indoor plumbing to be on a mission, right? That is not the case. A mission is just the how. And so when I look at this, I'm sure you know someone who is recently retired, right? And how often do we find that they are busier after they retire than when they were working, right? And the reason is because they are trying to figure out the how when their what and their why was never aligned. So they're doing 100 different things to try to figure out, how am I going to fulfill these things? My dad was a high school English teacher for 30 plus years. I cannot go to the grocery store without him having a 10-minute conversation with the person bagging my groceries because he's trying to fulfill those things that matter most to him in the only way he did it for 30 plus years, which is having students to talk to and teach and engage. And so I get it. But when you don't define those things, you end up searching for years and years and years to try to figure out your how. And the reason that you struggle is because the what was never defined.
Right. I mean, that's so mind blowing, because I know so many of us have really, tried to look at, read books, tried to look at so many different things, we look at our personality profiles and we take all these tests to try to identify what is that magical something, because we have this inkling that we could be really great if we just knew what it was, right? Like what what we needed to focus on, but we go down these paths where it's like, well, maybe I should be like this person because I really admire them and we have some similarities, or maybe I should try this because it's based on my personality and what do I know?
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about this is that you're really asking us to not just choose, but choose and live with that for a little bit and observe and see if it's true.
Yeah.
And if it's not true, to dig deeper. And it's really remarkable to me because even while we're talking about this, I'm looking at I keep looking down, everyone, for those who are watching on video. I keep looking down because I'm looking down at my results and thinking, maybe he's right. Maybe it's connection. Maybe it's not, And I think that what an incredible thing when you activate what it is that your black sheep are, and you're able to actually move forward with purpose. As Kathy Kelly over here, Kathy, thank you so much for tuning in live. She said, already enough, #on purpose, #find your flock. I mean, this is clearly a big supporter already. But I have to say, she's right, doing things on purpose. To be purposeful in what we're trying to do seems like we would be so much more effective in this world,
Agreed 100%. And my question for anybody sort of listening to that would be, what does on purpose mean to you?
Yeah.
Because if on purpose just means being intentional, I'm here to tell you that that's not going to get it done. Mm-hmm. On purpose is, to me, my definition that I would love to suggest that people adopt is doing something on purpose is doing something in alignment with your purpose. Wow. That's much different than just trying to be intentional, right? So we can set a goal and we can be intentional to try to reach that goal, but deliberate intention requires us to know every turn, every stop sign, every path along the way that we're going to take to get there, and to make those choices with deliberate intention, not to wander off the path. Mm-hmm. And so those are the things that take people from good to great, in my opinion. And I've watched it happen. Transformation is a scary word. I have found when I first started this work, I tried to use the word transformation in my keynotes. And what I found is that that's a 4-letter word for most organizations. They don't like, you know what transformation is to them? Money. That's what they think of. They go, God, transformation sounds really expensive, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, what I have found is that we have to get to these things first. But when we teach people to discover what these black sheep values are, what we're doing is we're building bridges to the organizational values that the company cares about. So I think what we are finding now and experiencing since COVID happened is that with the number of furloughs and the layoffs and everything else that has happened, that has been an incredibly challenging time for everyone. I also sit there and say, well, now the people that are left, the people that were fortunate enough to maybe keep their jobs, are now being asked to produce more with less, because it's not like they're changing the goals. These are things that they're still trying to hit, right? So how do we do that? And the answer is, you have to bring your unique contribution to the table. What makes you irreplaceable? And the truth to that is, it's your black sheep values. It's, if I looked at it and you told me that one of the organizational values was transparency, I have to look at that through the lens of my black sheep to go, how can I engage with transparency? If I wing it, I may try to write a million different ways, but if I'm being deliberate with my intention, I go creativity. How can I use creativity in the message of transparency? Hope. How can I use transparency to drive hope into my team? Impact. How can I use transparency to have the type of impact with our clients that it needs to have to keep them wanting to stay a client? I can go through each and every single one of my black sheep, and that's what I bring, that only I bring. You bring something different. You're going to look at it and go, how can I use truth to drive transparency? How can I use creativity? How can I use pleasure or love in transparency? Because that unique perspective is what makes you the one of a kind original that you are.
Mm-hmm. And actually, speaking of one of a kind, original, John writes in, are we going to see a guitar get used? I mean, we're just looking, I know, it's like candy on the wall, isn't it? It's just like,
It is. It is. It's history. That's what you see is 20
yeah.
years, 20 years worth of history back there.
Yes. And I saw Rhonda a little bit earlier. She says, yes, 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 so good. The impact individually is awesome. And for teams and orgs is transformative.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and so how are people coming and working with you now? You know, I mentioned a little bit earlier, you've got this book coming out and clearly you're already working with folks. But what's the vision? Can you share the vision with me now? Or
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. So here's there's a couple of things, right? So I look at it as sort of parallel tracks. On one track, I've got the individual. So I've got individual leaders and individuals within an organization. And then I have organizations as a whole on the other track. And they're both headed in the same direction, which is good news. Yeah. But what we look at is something a little bit different. So on all of the talks that I've been doing recently, since we've created this assessment, I'm able to create what I call a values map for the organization. So when the organization tells me, here are our 5 or 6 core values of the organization, I can look at it and tell them, well, here are the 5 or 6 things that your employees actually care about, right? Mm-hmm. So we're able to look based on gender of either male, female, or non-binary. And then we have a 10-year sort of age range from under 20 to over 60. And what they do is they take the assessment. And so every organization that takes it, I'm able to take that data and give them very detailed information about what matters to the 20 to 30 year olds, to the 30 to 40 year olds, to the 40 to 50 year olds, and give them each a flock of 5 for each age range and gender. And what that does is it helps you get deliberate with your intention instead of just trying to blanket approach something that is proof that it doesn't work. You know, one of the things we just did recently, and this is, you're going to find this funny, I found this hysterical, is that women in this particular organization cared about things like wisdom in their 30s, but wisdom didn't show up in men until their 50s.
You know, so, I can make a comment about that. I don't.
Yeah, no, I'm like, I might resemble that remark, but that is something for me that when you start to understand, right, you really start to understand how to engage your people. When you look and you go, gosh, you know what? None of our core values are represented in the people that we have right here. The stuff they care about is not the stuff we care about. So how can we build those bridges to connect the two? Because that is how you're going to be a vibrant culture. It's how you're going to maintain your status and be a high performing organization, right? And so that's what I've been doing recently. So I help people from an organizational standpoint connect their organizational values to what matters most to their employees. And on the employee side, on the leadership side, it's you've got to discover this stuff. And this is what blows me away, Kiki. When you accept a job to go to work for the organization that you work for, they hand you an employee handbook and they go, here's what you agreed to when you work here. And you go, okay, I'm good. Thank you. I have it. Right. And so your boss shows up one day and they're like, here's our goals for 2021. We'd love to know how you're going to get them. How are you going to help us achieve them? You would never look at your boss and go, I think I'm going to wing it. You would never, ever do that, right?
Well, you might try, but they may not be your boss for long.
You're going to be walking your way right out the front door. No, what do? You go, oh, I'm glad you asked. I've got this 5-page Excel spreadsheet that I've broken down per tab, and I'm going to explain to you the 6 gates that I have created. And here's my timeline for achieving everything. And we have this whole plan, but when it comes to us and our rules, we just choose to wing it over and over and over again. And so what this allows us to do is to function with deliberate intention so that we don't have to wing it. We can sit there and go, here are the things that are my non-negotiables. So what that means is if I'm making a decision about something and something that I'm making a decision is rubbing up against one of my personal core values, I can address it because I know exactly what it is that's bothering me. Or if it doesn't, I can let it go and not hold on to it and waste time and energy on something that is not a non-negotiable. Those are the things that help us lead with purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just so powerful. And especially right now, no matter where you are in your journey, and whether you are someone who's thinking about, okay, for my organization, I really need to understand how to move forward. I mean, look, in any sort of situation, whether you're thinking about on an individual level or for your staff or for your team or for your community, we are all having to figure out how things need to change with the way that we're innovating and we're making decisions moving forward. I mean, we're all kind of in the same boat together in that we really need to understand what our strengths are and what our values are. And in the past, maybe we had a little bit of luxury in having more time to figure this out. But if we're going to be as effective as possible, we need it behooves us, it benefits us to understand what those strengths are sooner and what those values are sooner. And John said something, he said that was pretty cool. What's the technology being used? I'm using StreamYard today, John. So that's what we've got going on. I can pull up the questions and the comments. So if you have comments or questions for Brant, then please go ahead and add those.
You bet.
All right. So, in the association chat community, I ask a question every single week. It's a different question. And this week, the question was this. So I want to, okay, I'm getting to it, I promise. I was talking to you and having such a good time that I lost track of where I was. What's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career? This is very interesting an interesting question for you to answer today, Brant.
Well, this whole book for me was born out of a horrible experience, right? And so this is something that you realize when you start doing sort of research into how our values are formed. Sometimes they're formed from, what Maslow calls peak experiences, and other times they're formed from really horrible things that happen during your life that you go, I never want to experience that again, or I never want to be like that, or it's hard. And that's why some of this work can be really difficult, because you have to go back to sort of move forward a little bit, And so for me, what I wish I would have known was what these things that mattered most to me were, because I found myself in sort of the worst scenario in my life back in 2012. My oldest son, Theo, was diagnosed with this rare blood cancer, and he needed a bone marrow transplant to survive. And so they, told us this is what it's going to look like. It's 30 days in the hospital. It's 30 more days here and 30 more days there. And so at the end of 100 days, he'd be back to sort of playing soccer and doing the things that he was doing. And so, we found a match pretty quickly and started this journey. And our journey didn't look that way. We ended up living in the hospital for 263 days or so with him battling. And we faced this crossroads during his journey. And this is really where the book was birthed from. He got the transplant, and the transplant was successful, but he developed something called graft versus host disease, which can be deadly. And it's basically where the marrow that's inserted in your body doesn't recognize the environment that it was placed in. And so it begins to attack. And the way that they treat that is they super suppress your immune system so it won't fight back, right? And so they did that. And so when they did that, he ended up contracting this deadly fungus. And the way that you treated the fungus was you super boosted the immune system. And so he had two things that were threatening his life that had opposite treatments and created this zero-sum game. So one afternoon, the doctors sort of call my wife and I into the parents' lounge. And, we sit down in front of this row of doctors, and they say, we are so sorry, but there's nothing else that we can do. We don't think he's going to make it through the night. You should probably go say your goodbyes and call who you need to call. And so, we are not prepared for that news. Yeah. And so I grab my wife's hand. We walk back down to his room on the pediatric cancer ward at Florida Hospital for Children. And we grab his younger brother, who's about 3 years younger than him. we go into that room and we sit on the edge of the bed, and you try to find these words to say goodbye. And Kiki, sitting on the edge of a bed and hearing your child say, "I'm going to miss you, Daddy."
Oh,
right.
My God.
It's, you don't recover from something like that. You just have to try to process. And so I'm sitting there and I call my younger brother. My younger brother lives up in New Hampshire. He's 1,500 miles away. And I'm like, "Listen, bud, you're not going to have time to make it down here. So unfortunately, if you want to say your goodbyes, you're going to have to do it over the phone." And so, he did it, and he was incredibly distraught, as you could imagine. And he hung up that phone and he felt helpless. And so he decides he's going to sit on his couch and he's going to hold up these poster boards is in this sort of Hail Mary attempt to try to find a solution. And so he never says a word. He plays the song "Fix You" by Coldplay. And from start to finish, he holds up 55 different poster boards. "My nephew is dying. This is what's happening. This is what he has. These are the drugs he's on. We're out of ideas. Please help us. If you know anyone, if you have any ideas." He's got less than 24 hours.
Wow.
He uploads it to YouTube. I sat on the edge of the bed all night with Theo, trying to be present, right? Not just trying to accept every moment that's there with him. He makes it through the night. And the next morning, my phone's ringing off the hook. I'm trying to ignore it. And after a couple of hours, it's literally hot to touch. And so I finally pick up the phone and I look at it. And I have all these messages and texts and emails from people that I don't know.
And you're like, "What is this?"
And I have no idea, right, why that is. And so what I didn't realize is that I didn't know my brother had made this video and uploaded it to YouTube. And so by the time I picked up my phone, that video had been seen over 500,000 times.
Wow.
And one of the people who called and left me a message was Dr. Kodianis at MD Anderson in Houston, who happens to be a leading researcher on this fungus that was killing him. And he's like, "Listen, there's this alternative treatment that I don't know that you're aware of. Can I talk to your doctor? It may help us treat one while we do this treatment on the other." And so we said, absolutely. And then I got a call from Dr. Tim Johnson from Good Morning America. And he's like, "You tell your doctor, anybody he wants to talk to, get me a list and I'll try to make it happen in the next 24 hours. So we made a list of a Dr. Dana Farber in Boston and a researcher at Cornell University. And the four doctors put their heads together and they came up with this crazy plan to try to save Theo's life. And it worked. And so we went from no hope to finding a solution that we were told was impossible in 24 hours. Now, how that happened, I believe, with everything in me, was because we were united in purpose. We had people speaking those black sheep values into existence in such an incredibly powerful way that they just refused to accept anything other than we have to find this answer that they tell us doesn't exist. I was incredibly thankful for the miracle. Theo just turned 22 years old, and before COVID happened, he spent the first time in a classroom since the 8th grade, right? So like a completely different experience. And as I'm sitting there and incredibly thankful for this miracle that we watched happen, for years and years after that happened, the last thought I had before I went to bed every night was, I hope he doesn't think I gave up on him. And while I can look back now and try to, logic myself into that sort of a thought, that I know that wasn't the case, but the truth is it's a valid question. Mm-hmm. And if I would have done this work, if I would have identified my black sheep values before this tragedy struck, the conversation of me sitting on the edge of that bed with my son would have been completely different. It would have been loaded with creativity and hope and impact and all of those things that now I know speak into existence on a daily basis would have impacted him in a completely different way than what was said. And the reason I wrote this book is because I feel like I hope that most of us never have to experience something like that in our lives. But I also am not naive enough to know that there's not a storm brewing somewhere in someone's life where they're going to need to make some really important decisions in their life. And if you don't have these things defined, mm-hmm. and you approach this by winging it, you are setting yourself up for years worth of beating yourself up on the other end, of questioning the decisions that you made. Whereas if you had these things defined and you approached everything with the thought of, I'm just going to honor these things that matter most to me, no matter what, knowing that I can't control outcomes, I can only control the deliberate intention that goes into honoring these things. You take your happiness away from an outcome or a result, and you place it on the things that you control. And that, to me, is the purpose of this book, is to get people to understand that we don't control outcomes, but we most certainly can control whether or not we honor the things that matter most to us on a daily basis. And so I have spent the last 5 or 6 years figuring out how to do that, and wrote this book last year that finally is ready to come out, that teaches people how to speak these things into existence, choosing when and where they appear in their daily lives, looking at their calendar and literally writing in the black sheep values they want to appear, and taking it out of the, by chance or luck or accident or hoping or praying that some perfect moment appears where you can speak these things into someone's life, and just going, no, I'm going to program them to appear when I want them to appear. Since I've been doing that, Kiki, my life has transformed. My speaking, I started in January of 2019 of being deliberate with my intention of literally programming my values into my day. Within 6 months, my engagements to speak tripled. My fee tripled. This article comes out naming me one of the top 10 motivational speakers, alongside Amy Cuddy, who's brilliant, and Magic Johnson and Jack Nicklaus. And
and you're saying, wow, hey.
so that is literally the reaction I had, right? And this is what I've discovered. And this is both the scary and exciting thing. I asked myself, I'm like, Jack Nicklaus has won 18 majors. Magic Johnson is one of the most famous basketball players who has ever played the game. Amy Cuddy is one of the most brilliant people who have ever walked the planet. Why am I in this group of people? And what I discovered is that living your life with deliberate intention is just as rare as everything that those people have accomplished. And so why wouldn't I be in that group? And so I embraced it. And here we are, a year later, and my life is like, I'm on this wave that of transformation, of not just for me in my life, but of helping others and giving them this opportunity to take control of their lives in a way that they never even thought possible. And when I can put myself in a position to help others change what's possible, I can't think of anything more that feeds my purpose more than that. And so, I have waited so long for this book to come out that all I want now is for people to experience that transformation and know that there's something more out there for them, but they have to be willing to do a little bit of work to get there.
Well, I am so excited I'm excited not just for you, I'm excited for me, because I have started on this process. I went through and identified my first flock of 5, and I know I need to keep track of all of it, but I can't wait to work through this program and this process and to find out more and to get to that point, because I'm telling you, just listening to your story, and I don't know about everyone who's listening right now, or if you're listening or watching this later, but I just got chills, because going through that, really understanding, I think if we think back to times when we might have regrets, where we might have questions about, could I have been better or done something better at a point, and we're really honest with ourselves, who wouldn't want to have a better grasp on what their true values are and how they can best bring that and honor that in the world.
Yeah.
And I think identifying those strengths right now is so critical. It's such good timing. It's really important timing, I think.
I did not plan for a global pandemic to happen
No.
in the launch of this book, but it is most certainly helpful to keep your anxiety at bay and to give you a sense of control over your life that I think is desperately needed right now.
Well, okay. So I know that we have about 5 minutes left. I wanted to actually mention to everyone who's watching right now, I had alluded in a couple of different places that you should be paying attention because I have a surprise to talk to you about. And it's not a surprise, but it is because nobody really knows about this much yet. And you're going to be hearing more about it. But let me go ahead and tell you, there is a 5-week live training that is called Rock Your Flock, Leading with Deliberate Intention. And I'm working with some great people. Association Chat is working with some great people, Flock Theory. We're working with Brant. And this is going to be a chance for you to participate, to learn more about your black sheep values, to walk through it. Brant, talk to us about it. Tell us, tell them all about it.
I am so excited, Kiki. I'm telling you, like, this is, my cheeks hurt from smiling so much because this makes me so excited. So, Rhonda Payne from Flock Theory and myself and you and some friends at Book Thinkers sort of decided that we were going to put forth a free training for everyone, right? So it's one thing to read a book. It's another thing to have access to people who are going through the same thing and be able to talk through some things. So what we've decided to do is to sort of reach out and say, this is what we're going to do. It's every Thursday in the month of October. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give 2 times a day. So there'll be like a 2 o'clock Eastern time and a 7 o'clock Eastern time. And you join whatever one you want to, and we'll try to tape them as well for people who can't make either. But the goal of this is it's a 5-week program where we're going to take you through discovering what your initial flock of 5 is. We're going to prove that they are in fact your sheep and that you're not caring for somebody else's sheep. And then we're going to teach you how to speak them into existence. And I'm just here to tell you that I just finished a group of, for the book launch, of 40 people that we did. And the transformation in this group is mind numbing to watch what's happening in their lives and how things in as little as 5 weeks have changed. And so the goal of this is this, the training is free. We ask for 2 things. One is simply buy the book, because we're going to use the book as a textbook. So we're going to actually go through different parts of the book every week so that you have it. Yes, there it is. That sexy beast of a book. I am so excited about that book. And then we're going to ask you to download the Book Thinkers app, which is just a way to make notes each week to remind yourselves of the takeaways that you're getting from the book. That's it. That's all we're doing. It's a free training. We are set up to do as many people as we want to. Now, between your organization and the Book Thinkers organization, we're talking about 125,000 people, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah.
That makes me incredibly excited and scares the bejesus out of me at the same time. But here's the deal. This is my challenge that I want to put out to all of my Association Chat family. It's one thing to think you know what matters most. It's another thing to prove it. And my advice is this. Most of the time, the people that I work with try to get themselves to believe that these are the things that matter to them. But you only need belief when you don't have proof. So this 5 weeks is going to provide the proof that you need so that you don't have to believe. You simply can point and show what's happening, give the examples so that you don't have to convince yourself of anything. You will know exactly what matters most to you and how to use those values to make better decisions in your life and influence the results that you want to see. You can't control those results, but we can influence those results by honoring these things that matter most with deliberate intention. So I hope that we have 30,000 plus people in the Association Chat family say, this is what I want to do. I'm tired of winging it. I want to take it to that next level. I know for a fact that a fraction of a percentage of people actually decide to do the work. So those that do decide to do it, know that you will have a competitive advantage like nothing else I have ever seen in my life when it comes to living the type of life of fulfillment that is going to give you that sense of pride that you are living a life that worth living, that's worth a legacy to leave behind, right? And that's the goal. I want you to lead that way. I want you to convince your people to do this as well, because when you start to give that unique contribution is when we start to grow as a society and start to produce at a level that we didn't even think was possible, because we're giving that uniqueness that is us every time we come to work.
I love it. Oh, I'm so excited. And Judy, I want to say, I see your comment. May we invite others to participate? Absolutely. Now, what it's important for you to all understand is that after we finish our live discussion in just a minute with Brant, today, if you're not signed up to the associationchat.com mailing list, make sure you have joined that mailing list. I'm sending out a very important invitation with links to join this training after this session. So if you're not on that mailing list, go join the associationchat.com mailing list, and also watch in the private Facebook group. So if you're not active there, then make sure you're on the mailing list so you don't miss anything. It's going to have a link for the book, so you can order the book. It's also going to have a link so you can sign up. And this is all kicking off in October, so we've got a little bit of time. Now, I'm going to add to that. I'm going to tell you that for the first 10 people who tweet out and invite people to be a part of this, okay? And so you have to watch for the mailing, and that way you can have the link. But the first 10 people to tweet out and invite others to participate in this, I will buy your book for you. I will send you the book. So I will send you the information about that, the first 10. If you're in, just let me know in the comments right now, right below, say that you're in, you want to participate. And thank you, Brant. I'm so excited that you did this. I'm really... I can't wait for us to really all embrace and find our black sheep values, our flock of five. Yes. And I'm so thankful to working with Flock Theory and just such an excellent group of people, book thinkers. I think it's going to be just an excellent experience.
We are so excited. Thank you for this. You know that I love what you do. I'm a huge believer and proponent of what you do. And so for me, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I look forward to growing with all of you.
All right. Well, with that, I wish you good luck with the rest of your week, everyone. And a reminder to keep learning and growing every day. As Joseph Campbell once said, the cave we fear to enter holds the treasure we seek. Have a great week, everyone.